So we shared a little bit of our story, my wife's fascinating story about her upbringing and lessons that she learned. So tonight, in tonight's discussion, we're going to discuss 5 priceless principles. Does that sound very bold to call them priceless principles?
I
But
think they're priceless.
they're priceless for us at least. And maybe
Absolutely.
they'll be priceless for you as well.
Yeah.
There's 5 priceless principles to reach someone in a very deep way. These are all things that can be applied even to your own personal growth, as we have been able to apply them to our personal growth, to our family's growth. We have 6 children, and Baruch Hashem, we're trying to inspire them. So hopefully these principles will be helpful. And we have about 30 minutes or so together tonight, and we'll do our best to give it over to you in a way that is quick, concise, and meaningful. So let's begin.
Yeah. You want to jump in right with the great story about the.
Okay, we have a story about a turkey, and that will lead us into principle number 1. I just want to say, interesting story about, and many of this audience might be familiar with this famous story of Rabbi Nachman. Rabbi Nachman of Breslov has a very famous story about the turkey prince.
Yeah.
And it's actually, I spoke, and I believe it was my first or second year on the job to a Project Inspire crowd. And I actually remember telling this story, and here we are again,
Okay.
a little bit over a decade later. The story goes that there was a prince, and the prince was struggling with some identity issues. And one day, decided that he's identifying himself as a turkey. So the king was there, was at the dinner table, and the king had a bunch of his guests and cabinet members over, and they're all sitting around and acting very, very royal. And in walks this prince, thinking to himself, hey, guess what, everybody? Here I am a turkey. And he starts acting like a turkey and actually climbs under the table and refuses to get it. He says, I'm not getting out. I am a turkey. Turkey, stay under the table. If you want me to eat, you got to give me food. I'm a turkey. All of the different kings' um, cabinet members, everyone's embarrassed, and people are trying to convince him. And this is like, let me speak to him. Everyone wants to speak to him. I'm going to be the one to convince him he's not a turkey. So they're all going, they're trying to convince him you're not a turkey, you're not a turkey. And he refuses, no matter what, he's not listening. Suddenly, one of the people sitting around the table says, let me give it a shot. And he climbs under the table and he sits right down next to the prince. And the prince says, hey, what are you doing here? So he says, well, what are you doing here? And the prince says, I'm a turkey. So this fellow who sits down next to him says, okay, well, I'm also a turkey. He says, oh, all right, you know what? If you're a turkey, I'm a turkey, so then we could sit here together. After a couple of minutes, this fellow who goes under, this king's advisor, says, you know what? It's great that we're turkeys, but why do we have to sit here under the table? Why do we have to sit here under the table? So he says, you're right. Turkeys have rights too. So together, they say to themselves, you know what? Let's go out from under the table. I think I might be butchering the story. But anyways, then the advisor says, you know what? As us as turkeys, why do we have to eat scraps? Turkeys have rights too. And the prince says, you're right. As a turkey, why do we have to eat scraps? And he starts getting the prince to start acting a little bit more like a human being, but not by telling him you're not a turkey or a human being, but actually by convincing him that you can be a turkey, but you could also eat like a human being. You could also, so this it's a great story, and I think that there's so many lessons to learn from the story about trying to influence other people, because very often we come in with this attitude that like, I want to change you. I want to make you, I know the proper way. I know what's right and you don't. And I want to change you to be something that you are not. And that is a very, very difficult thing to do, to get someone to say, the person that I am right now is no longer good and I want to be somebody else. But what's a much more effective approach is to validate someone where they are and say, you know what, I validate you and you're amazing. and everything's fantastic, and I'm not trying to change you. I'm not trying to
Right.
change who you are, but I'm trying to build on who you are and to show that there could be something more. We're not changing, but we're trying to build. And I'll let you weigh in because there's so much more to say about this. But it just really is just such a powerful principle. So our first priceless principle is never try to change a person, but help them build on what they already have.
Absolutely. But just understanding that it's not about like, we're going to give to you, it's about where are you at? How can I meet you there as a person? And then slowly, how can the values that Yiddishkeit has work for you? I just do want to also just say that I do remember, always my father used to always, as children, we would say, oh, was that, did you make them from, And my father used to always say, I don't make anyone from. I get to know them as people. I share some of the values with them as people. And if they've taken on some of the mitzvos and become Shomer Torah and mitzvos because of some of the values that I've been able to meet them where they're at, that's them. That's not me. I think also yesterday's point just about that word that kirov, and mikarev. Like I just think that in and of itself is so telling, just bringing closer, and that's the goal.
And that's
It's
all
not,
we do.
yeah.
That's all we do. You can ask me how many people have I attempted to inspire. You can ask me how many people that I've taught Torah to. I'm a teacher of Torah. I try to believe that I am a rebbe to these people, a teacher to these people, just like someone who's teaching in any sort of yeshiva, except our talmidim, our students just come from a different background.
Yeah.
Um,
And I think just about what we're saying here about meeting them where they're at, it's not just that you're a teacher of Torah, but it's that you're also trying to create relationships with them.
And that brings us to principle number 2, is that instead of coming from a place of, and going back to the turkey prince, right?
Mm-hmm.
Whereas the advisor, the advisor could have come along and said, I'm good and I'm going to teach you how to be less of a turkey. Instead, he said, I'm a turkey, let's grow together. And the more that one approaches, someone who's trying to influence somebody else approaches it as, we're all on a journey. Let's do this journey together. The more effective that person will be at moving somebody forward. And I think very much with us, our kiruv, our outreach is very much about the fact that Dvorah and Shlomo BUXBAUM are on this journey. We want you to come with us. We're doing our best to grow. We're doing our best to be spiritual, growing Jews in a time when that is so difficult. And we want you to be part of that. We want you to be part of that journey and join us in that. And I think that people are much more receptive to being on a journey together with you than to feel like you're coming from a place of, I got this figured out. Why don't you join me in it?
Yeah, I think so. I think it's also one of the perks for us. As I thank Hashem for this every day, for the opportunity to just keep the themes that we're trying to teach about and the ideas that we're learning about with our people, just to keep them so alive and so fresh for our own life. And anytime that we're doing, a session, whether it's a one-on-one or within a group, and we're giving over information and we're bringing our own, that we are struggling with this just because we've been doing this for the last many years of our life, or have even been raised with these values. This is something that might be a struggle, and B, even if it's not a struggle, certainly one of the things that we strive towards is not that it becomes, as we say, mitzvahs anashim milumadat, that it just becomes something by habit and by rote. So we want it to be something that's fresh. And I think that when we feel that way, that, oh, this is such a great opportunity for me to be able to be on this journey with you, they know it and they feel it and they can see. And we have days that are greater and days that are not as great. We have our ups and our downs. Just we are also human. But I think that when they know that, it's very, very well received, and it helps them on their own journey.
One of my favorite chavrusas, one of my favorite learning partners was a fellow who had just moved to town, and he had just finished producing an independent film. He was a movie maker, and he produced an independent film like this sci-fi, like a kind of like a really out of the box,
Yeah.
wacky independent movie. Won awards, played at all these festivals, and he was starting to work on his second script. And he came to me the first time because he wanted me to teach him more about angels, because he was going to work on angels for his second script. And we ended up deciding that we're going to meet once a week. This fellow was a little bit of, what many people might say, somewhat of a hippie, I guess, if you could say that, a hipster or a hippie, whatever you might call them today.
I
And
think hipsters and hippies are different,
yeah,
but
I would say more of a
maybe a
hippie.
combo of the
Maybe more of a
two.
hippie. So we decided we're going to meet once a week, Wednesdays at 11 a.m. We have a beautiful lake that's near us. So, we decided it was good. It was the right venue for the types of conversations that we had. And we said we're going to meet outdoors at this beautiful lake and we're going to learn Chumash Sefer Bereshis once a week. And I can tell you, this was the highlight of my week. We sat down together and we would learn only a few psukim every week. And I used to bring my Mikros Gedolos, but I used to bring Svarim, a whole stack of books, and a lot of them very deep, because the questions that he asked, he was such a profound, such a phenomenal thinker. And the questions that he asked were great, and the few parshas, because we would go slow, and we learned a few parshas together, and I can say that the level of depth that I learned those parshios, I cherish those times because of the questions, and he saw how excited I was. And then sometimes we would get stuck on a question and we would literally go for a walk. And this was in the middle of the winter, it would be freezing. I'd be bundled up and we would go for a walk around the lake and just try to hash it out. It was so beautiful. For me, it was growing. It was growing in my own learning. It was growing. It was learning Chumash in a way that I never would have. I didn't learn like that in yeshiva, but it was this wonderful opportunity. So again, we want to be the ones to grow. And before we move on to principle number 3, just to make sure that our presentation has some Torah in it, I just want to share with you another, just a very short, beautiful
Great
idea
spot, yeah.
that I saw from Rav Nachman Breslov, also in the fourth or the fifth Torah in Likutei Moharan, where he says that when Moshe Rabbeinu, when Moses was negotiating with Hashem, because God wanted to destroy the Jewish people after the sin of the golden calf. And Moshe says to God, he says, if you're going to destroy the Jewish people, macheni, erase me, erase my name. And it sounds, if you're reading just the verses, it sounds like what Moshe's saying is like, I don't want to be part of it, almost like, blackmailing God. Like, I'm not going to be part of it, take me out also. I mean, Nachman says that Moshe was saying, Macheni, erase me, because if I am not great enough to be the leader, to be able to defend the Jewish people, if I'm not that great, then I'm not worthy of it. I don't want my name to be associated, because it must be that there's a flaw in me. Maybe I'm too full of myself. Macheni, just erase me, so I'll be more humble. So as teachers, we want to be humble, and we want to say that we're on this growing path. We're not here to judge, we're here to grow. We want you to grow together with us. So that's principle number 2. We're best at influencing others when we are going on the journey together. Priceless principle number 3. This has to do with teaching people about God. As one would imagine, we deal with many people who claim, I don't believe in God. I don't believe in God. Can you prove God to me? Prove God. Things like that. And we'll meet people from all backgrounds, just as you will meet people from all backgrounds. God forbid, it could even be, a child who grew up in a frum environment will say, I don't really buy this. I don't believe in this. And I believe that it's true to say that principle number 3 is most people who don't believe in God just don't believe in the definition of God that has been given to them. I believe, we've seen and we've observed that people do believe in something. There are very few, and I'm going to push and I'm going to say that possibly no one who will strictly deny that there is anything beyond what we can touch and feel. People do believe in an Olam Haruchni. They might call it many different things. There are people that will not use the word and really say, I don't believe in God. But figure out what they do believe in, because you will find that they do believe in something. And if you see in all of the books right now that talk about personal development, that don't want to talk about God because they don't want to be religious books, they found so many different ways to coin this, to make it sound scientific, but really this acknowledgement that there is something bigger, there is something greater.
Yeah. It's just a great thing to think about because so many times you'll get pushback from people and you'll be talking about whatever Hashem, the Almighty, however you want to refer to God, and you feel like there's like this wall that's up, whether it's a one-on-one meeting, a Zoom session with somebody, a class that you're just feeling like there is definitely some kind of pushback that's going on. And when you just get down to it, when you strip it down, you're really talking about the same thing. And I think that once that definition is created, and once the person that you're talking to realizes, like, wait a second, this is really, it's not about that I'm trying to understand your definition of God and make that a reality in my life. I just view it as something a little bit different, but that is God. We're talking about the same power, the same infinite power that I'm referring to is the way that you're talking about it also. And light bulbs will literally go on in people's heads, and suddenly it's like you've stripped away a whole layer that's been blocking their soul from entering anything that you said, because they're like, well, I don't know what he's talking about, because this God that she's referring to, I don't believe exists. And then suddenly they understand that it's really the same thing, and then all the Torah is now able to enter because they're like, oh, it's just a different definition. So I think this could be a huge, it's a shift. It's a little bit of a, just like pivot in recognizing that, but I think it could be tremendously powerful for everybody to recognize that.
Now, this doesn't necessarily mean that they're believing that, the Haya Haya V'yiyeh, that Hashem is everything and the Borei Umanig, but it's a starting point of acknowledging that something is out there. How many times have we heard comments like, I don't believe in God, but I believe in karma?
Yeah, that's a pretty big one.
I mean, that's common language.
Yeah.
Someone says, I don't believe in God, but I believe that I have a soul. So it's this acknowledgement that there is something there. If I can share, well, just one story that did not happen to me, but just a very very famous line by a famous person in the Kiruv world, where he says, he was having a conversation with someone who proclaimed to be an atheist. And he said, "Oh, okay, so you claim to be an atheist, so that I'm guessing that you've done your research and you've looked here and you've looked there and you've tried to analyze and you've been to seminars." And I said, "No, I just don't believe in God." So he says, "Okay, well, then you're not an atheist, you're just ignorant."
Yeah. I think it's Daniel Mechanic who says that, just to give credit.
He might also be connected to the Project
Yeah.
Inspire. So that's such a powerful point that someone might have just jumped to a certain conclusion, but they haven't done the research. There is a certain image of what God is as being, this, some long white beard sitting on top, making these decisions, zapping people every now and then. And do we believe that? Does anyone believe that? This idea of God being a vengeful, an angry God, always like, we don't believe that either.
Right.
So,
and just to remember that it's not that you're trying to get them necessarily to the same definition, especially not right away.
But to acknowledge something.
But exactly, once that spark is there and that little layer of the soul is open, then already you have an entryway, and then it's a process of really getting them to see, and then the relationship can grow. But until that point, until they recognize it, it's completely blocked.
So this Makar, he said, well, you know what? If that's the God that you believe in, I don't believe in God either.
Right.
But obviously, it's just about figuring out what the person does. I got an email a couple of weeks ago from a fellow who we were dealing with for such a long time, who always says, I'm an atheist, I don't believe. And I got this email. I was on it, and different members of his family were on it. And it was an article written by someone I don't remember who. And it seemed at first when I started reading it, it seemed like a piece that was attacking God. Why does God need prayer? And it seemed like this was just another thing that he was trying to do to try to discourage his family from believing in God. But then, as the letter went on, it started saying about believing in that you can connect with God through nature and things like that. And I realized that the point of this email wasn't to try to attack, but it was he was trying to see from me, what do I feel? Do I feel that's legitimate? That can somebody really find that there's a lokus, that there's godliness when being out connecting through nature? And I validated that. And again, I pretty much ignored all of the attacks that were in there, and I validated that. And in a back and forth exchange, the result of that was that he emailed with his family, he had been discouraging, all CC'd. He said, well, if that's the case, if Jews are able to believe that about God, then I think I could believe that also.
Yeah. I think the audience that we're speaking to has no idea who this individual was, but this was someone who was really for many, many years that we were dealing, just always putting up, I'm the atheist, I'm the atheist, I'm an atheist. And for him to be able to say that was absolutely tremendous.
And my initial, and if I wasn't paying close enough attention, I would have immediately started fighting back. I would have said, well, how could you say this? That's not what prayer is, and he misunderstood. That's not what he needed me to say.
Right.
He needed me to say, if that's what you want to believe, then that's okay. That's a good starting point. Principle number 3, most people who don't believe in God just don't believe in that definition of God. Principle number 4, create powerful and memorable moments for people. We don't live in a generation where people are being swayed or moved by fancy arguments, by logic, by debating, by challenging. What people want is a good feeling that comes along with a memorable moment. And while definitely people who are very, very strong hashkafa and know that there is so much emes in Yiddishkeit don't want to hear this, right? They want to know that, what do you mean I can present an argument? Bottom line is that what you can do in a moment, someone once said, I'm not about long conversations. I'm about infinite moments. That's a great line, right? I'm about infinite moments. And by the way, scientifically, they did a study, it just having nothing to do with religion, about making a good vacation. Okay, this is some vacation tips.
I think this is actually written about in a book creating moments.
About creating moments. Yeah. There's a whole book about it, scientific study, right? If you gain nothing from tonight, I'll tell you at least how to have a good vacation. They said that they interviewed families who had across the board, right? If they had to give a rating to every single day of a vacation, they gave decent, let's just say B+ to A- ratings across the board. When they asked overall, how would you rate your vacation? They rated it okay. Then they interviewed families that had an awful vacation, but had a couple of powerful, amazing moments, A++ moments, and their overall feeling about that vacation was much higher.
Yeah.
Showing that us as human beings, we're wired. We want to have these amazing moments. And when we're trying to move, when we're trying to inspire someone, if we could construct moments like that where they can be fully immersed, where even for a couple of seconds, at a Shabbos Seudah, for us, we've had a tremendous amount of Hatzlacha, success, inspiring people at our Purim Seudah, or things like that, or a Pesach Seder. We can talk about Israel a little bit, but just certain special moments. Those are moments that will go deep, deep down into people's hearts and into their neshamas.
Yeah, the moments are tremendous, and it's really the power of not underestimating the power of small moments. Sometimes you expect, oh, I'm going to have this experience, and it's just going to be like it's gonna, all the things, it's gonna just completely just blow off the charts, and it doesn't happen that way. And then when you look back at it, you're like, no, you know what it was? It was that tiny little thing that was the spark. In that same thing that you're referencing about the vacation, I remember just very quickly there was a reference to the hotel, like which hotel did better. And it showed that one of the like not as nice hotels was rated very, very high. And when they got down to why it was because by the poolside of this hotel, there was a special telephone that you picked up, and it was a popsicle hotline. And they would have a guy come down, dressed in his tuxedo with special white gloves, and he would hand out to the people who called out like these beautiful red popsicles. And they rated, the hotel was much less quality, but they rated so much higher because of that special moment that they were creating. So I think that when we are thinking about the moments that we're giving to the people that we're interacting with, it's something just to think about. What can make this moment a little bit extraordinary?
We do these very, very powerful trips to Israel, 10 days in Israel, where they're seeing all of the sights. They're seeing the Kotel, and they're going up north and Tzfat and everything, hearing powerful lectures. And so often, at the end of the trip, for us, I do men's trips, my wife does women's trips. So often at the end of the trip, I'll ask, what was your moment? What was that moment? And you'd be surprised what they'll say. I've had times where people, and even now, several years later, I ask a guy, what was your moment on the trip? He said, Friday night, you took me to Tish. And when I was there, right, sitting there in the bleachers with all these Hasidim, the Rebbe who was going around, right? It was maybe the Toldus Iron or whatever, right? The Rebbe was going around, and I'm telling you, he looked me in the eye, right? I'm some American guy, I'm dressed in jeans in the middle of a Hasidim, and he looked at me and he went like this to me. Right? And that
like,
moment,
God, he saw that.
that moment, to me, like I'm thinking, I'm like, no, I don't think the Rebbe looked at you. I don't think he saw you. Or maybe he think had a fundraiser. I don't know, but that moment. Or late Friday night, we were on the rooftop of Isha Torah, and a couple of Bachrim came, yeshiva guys came up, and we were singing together. And these were the things that weren't necessarily planned, but just those moments happened.
Yeah.
Those are going to be the things. In our work, people come in and out of our lives. People come in very, very excited and don't last long. And people come in resisting, and then something happens, something in their life causes it to trigger. Someone could be on the peripheral of our community for so long, and then out of the blue, something happened in their life. Sometimes not even something that's explainable, something inner, and suddenly it pushes them forward, and all of the little things here and there, suddenly everything now comes together. And we have to have bitachon. You just never know when these things are going to pay off.
Yeah, absolutely. And you don't take it personally, and you also always remember you never know where that seed will go. You don't think like, you never know. You just never know. We've seen it happening with children. We've seen where we've poured a lot into the parents and it hasn't even necessarily turned into anything. And then before we know it, the kid is ending up going to a year abroad in Israel in a wonderful program. We've seen it with our own students who are grown adults, and they've kind of, like Shlomo was saying, just they've heard of us, they've known of us, they know who we exist, and then suddenly have had, you said, I'm just going to give it a try, and sent an email and reached out. I just had a woman who went through, a very, very challenging experience of losing a child, and decided to just send an email, see how I was going to respond. And it was during the Corona period, so she had done a Zoom, just like checking it out. I don't even think she showed her face on the screen, and then sent an email and was waiting to see. And this woman, I mean, it's been almost a year, but she's on fire, and she is growing in her ruchnius tremendously. And it's just unbelievable to see how, she knew of us, like we were a thing, but then something happened in her life where she was like, okay, now I'm really ready for this. And it's just unbelievable. It's astounding.
And I don't want to end our discussion with a sad story, but here's somewhat of a bittersweet story. And again, spoiler alert, I'm just going to say, because I don't want to end on a down. This doesn't have a very, very happy ending, this story, but it is a powerful story where there was a fellow would come sometimes with his family, sometimes not. The whole family seemed to be somewhat parve about what we were doing, but yet he would pop in every now and then. And we used to have, I don't know if everyone watching is familiar with the traveling Hasidim, the great traveling Hasidim, and we used to bring them for a Shabbos. They would come every year right around Shabbos Hanukkah. And this fellow, he saw them one year traveling Hasidim, and we didn't know, like, they would come in, what effect were they having? We didn't know, but he came one year, he saw them. And then, interestingly enough, the next year, really about 3 or 4 months before, maybe right after the summer, this fellow started getting very, very involved with us. Very involved, coming to more and more classes, coming on Shabbos
On time to Minyan.
to shul,
Yeah.
unusual. He didn't know how to daven, and he would sort of just kind of stand in the back. Something was tugging at his neshama. And as it was coming closer to the traveling Hasidim Shabbos, he got so excited. We didn't know, like, how much are we going to host a meal, or what are we going to do? And he was like, I want to get behind it. And he was pushing, because I wanted to make this Shabbos
The most special.
amazing. And it was literally like his neshama was on fire. Something was tugging on his neshama. I don't know what it was, but I believe that it was the Rebbeinu Shalom pulling his neshama and inviting his neshama back home, because he didn't make it to that Shabbos. And
He had a sudden heart attack. It was
right.
like the craziest thing.
And that Shabbos with the traveling Hasidim, which he had sponsored, and he had so much
He planned the menu for. He planned the cutlery,
It ended up being the Shabbos right after his Levaya, and we dedicated it to him. But it was amazing to see that something was tugging on his neshama. That's what Hashem decided. And we just don't know, right? The Gemara says, Yesh kona olama b'sha'achas. Right? There's just moments where it's all about that one moment. It's all about that one hargasha, that one feeling of coming close to Hashem. And sometimes the person has to go through their whole life just to feel that. And if we could be the ones to affect that, then who knows? This could be, like Mordechai says to Esther, maybe this is why you were put in the palace. Who knows why Hashem put us in this position with this other human being in our life, even just to say the right thing to them at the right time, to inspire them, to just move their hearts, even just a moment, sometimes in ways that we can't even understand.
Whew, that seems like a heavy note to end off on.
So let's end off on that light note. But we want to thank you. I hope that these 5 priceless principles were priceless for you, and that you can take them and you can apply them in your own life. We invite you to find us and reach out to us if there's any way that we could be helpful in your journey, and in your journey inspiring others. And if you're ever in the Washington, D.C. area, stop by and say hi.
And don't forget that when you are on a journey to trying to help others get inspired, it really ends up inspiring you. And I hope that if nothing else, that you recognize that by you helping somebody else on their journey, you will become a more wholesome, a more genuine, a more connected person in your own life.
Amen to that, and a bracha to everyone to continue growing and inspiring others. And we want to thank you so much for joining us for this wonderful program. Wishing everyone a good night.
Have a good night.